It is to the American election that we turn our attention next, because Peter Geoghegan, the author of Democracy for Sale and editor of the Democracy for Sale Substack, has been working in conjunction with our friends at Byline Times on it's a sort of financial investigation, really, Peter. But why did you and Max Colbert undertake this investigation in the first place?
Well, what we were looking at, James, I think some of the same questions that you probably had, like, what's the relationship between American money and British money, when it comes to politics? How do these people influence each other? And I've spoken on your show a lot about what we call Tufton Street, these secretive think tanks that don't declare their donors, back Liz Truss, have had a huge impact on the country over the last 15 years. And even though they don't declare their donors, we actually do know some of their donations through the work of journalists. I must admit, I've been one of the people who's probably been really trying to find out their donors over the years. We have a few names. So what we decided to do is actually ask, well, what about these donors? Are they the kind of donors who are giving money to Tufton Street? Are they the kind of people who are also giving money to the Donald Trump campaign, to the Republican campaign? So what we started doing is actually, one thing I will say in fairness to America, they've actually got much better corporate records for this sort of stuff than Britain.
Which is how you found out over the years some of the donations that have gone into the British opaquely funded outfits, because the declaration in America of donations that have been made.
That's pretty much the one of few ways we ever find out. So what we did is we started doing exactly that, looking through the donors that we did have, the names that we had in America, and some of the ones we revealed here in the UK, and figuring out, well, have they given money to the US election? And surprise, surprise, they've given a lot of money to the US election. And would you be shocked to find out they haven't given much of it to the Democrats?
No, good Lord. No, I wouldn't be shocked at all. So who are we talking about, and what sort of sums?
We discovered about $45 million all told.
And to be clear, this is just the stuff you found. So the likelihood is that there'll be a heck of a lot more sloshing around.
Oh, yeah, this is just the few names that we do have on record as giving money to these Tufton Street organizations. We found about $45 million all told. We found one company which people might have heard of, British American Tobacco, makes lots of different cigarettes. They've been funding the Institute of Economic Affairs, which was said to have incubated Liz Truss. They've been funding the Institute of Economic Affairs for about 50, 60 years. They've donated $17 million to the Republicans, including $8.5 million to Donald Trump's Make America Great Again. By contrast, they donated $960 to Kamala Harris, not 960. So that's 17 million versus 960.
Why? Why would they give 960? It's better to give nothing, isn't it? That sounds completely absurd. Sorry, I know this isn't the central thrust of your investigation, but 960, it's like a joke.
I asked British American Tobacco to comment on this story. They have yet to issue a response. If they do, I'd be very happy to publish it. But it's very striking. This is a company with a big interest, very interest in specific policies, giving a large amount of money to Donald Trump.
Give us a reminder of what those policies are. So in the context of British and American Tobacco, it is a fear of legislation that might limit their profitability or curtail their profitability.
This is it massively. In America, it's particular issues. Actually, it's quite striking. There's issues around menthol cigarettes, which are very big in America and are seen as very addictive. There's moves to try and clamp down on menthol cigarettes, which is something British American Tobacco opposes. There's also issues around vaping and other types of secondary tobacco. The British American Tobacco have been quite vociferous. More so, interestingly, none of the other tobacco companies I could find that actually donated, but have been very much through the IEA and others at the forefront of pushing agendas over the last few years. And we've seen this with Donald Trump. That what's interesting about Donald Trump is he's taken large amounts of money from very specific sectors, often people who have an interest in him. We saw it with Peter Thiel and JD Vance. Peter Thiel, the big financier behind Palantir, the kind of very strong conservative, very fluid on democracy, it seems. Doesn't seem all particularly keen on it. But he's been really bankrolling Trump, and it looks like the quid pro quo for that is JD Vance. And so similarly, we're seeing here companies like British American Tobacco. What we also saw, fascinatingly, is people who have been small donors to Tufton Street, who are big figures on the American right, big funders who have been massively bankrolling the Trump campaign. I think we spoke on this show sometime last year, James, about the National Conservative Conference, if you remember that.
Yes, I do.
When Nat Conner, people like Suella Braverman stood up and said pretty out there things. Well, the guy who's a real founder of that is a guy called Thomas Klingenstein. And he has donated about $10 million to Donald Trump in the last couple of years. He's also bankrolled the Global Warming Policy Foundation, a kind of climate denial foundation on Tufton Street. Similarly, other donors who've given big money to Trump have also been involved in and giving money to Tufton Street as well. And what you can start to see in this is how it is really this kind of transatlantic network of people who have an interest in pushing very specific agendas, which, frankly, here in the UK have not done particularly well at the ballot box. They're not even the kind of agendas that Donald Trump talks about in public. He tries to distance himself with this Project 2025, the Heritage Foundation, this massive radical shrinking of the state, a really conservative worldview. He's tried to distance himself, but when you can see, if you look at the money, is that these people are very much bankrolling him, and they've also been involved in bankrolling British politics.
So I think you've half answered the question I was about to ask you, which was to just sort of précis the common ground. What is the political goal that these people and these organisations are pursuing on both sides of the Atlantic? And you mentioned it hasn't had much success at the ballot box in this country, but it has infiltrated every single level of the media, up to and including, and politics, up to and including Liz Truss's premiership. And I noticed that one of the donors that you identify actually told you that he became a Tufton Street donor after meeting a bloke called Madsen Piri, who founded the Adam Smith Institute. And he wrote in his autobiography about how they'd set upon a very deliberate and highly successful path of seeking to dictate public discourse by being in bed with various other spads and journalists and political figures. So what is the common goal that's shared by all of these individuals and institutions?
I think what you're looking at, I think, when you and I started talking about some of these issues a few years ago, James, people said, you guys are crazy, you're conspiracy theories.
This is true. Can confirm.
And then what we saw was Liz Truss's election, Liz Truss's victory, and we saw what was very much that ideology made flesh as Liz Truss. You're talking about taxes for the rich slashed, the state slashed,
no public spending, just let business do whatever the heck it wants. Let wealth, not even business, let wealth do whatever the heck it wants, and everyone else will be golden.
And at the same time, actually massively push back on people's civil liberties and rights at the same time. So it's the two sides of this. And this is what we can see it in Trump very clearly. With Trump, it's very front and centre. Here in the UK, it was a much more clandestine. But as you say, these agendas were pushed hugely here. And I think what we're seeing through this kind of connection is that this network isn't gone. And I think there is, especially when we don't have proper regulation of politics and political donations in this country, there still is that possibility for its influence here as well.
It's a very good point. And we haven't even mentioned the billionaire sanctioned by Ukraine, who features in this article and who, of course, gave £25,000 to the failed leadership campaign of honest Bob Jenrick. But we leave people with something to learn from the actual article, Peter Geoghegan, which you can find both on Peter's blog and at Byline Times. Thank you, mate. Always a pleasure. More power to your elbow, as ever.